What's up, everybody? Mike Miller with the Herald Times, columnist Sandy Graham.
Yep.
John Blau in the back, coming to you after a 34-27 Ohio State win. Number one Ohio State coming in here, and Indiana gave them a game. Indiana, from start to finish. This was a game that, frankly, this is they were close. They were close a couple times, right down there at the end of the final drive, and did so without their two probably best players, without Nate Sudfeld and Jordan Howard. Both of whom are dealing with ankle injuries, the severity of which probably won't know until this week, if not next Saturday, when IU takes the field. But Indiana's gave them a game, given Ohio State a game the last few years, and this was no different.
It was. I mean, it could have been an epochal victory, and close. They came close to pulling that off, and they'll be disappointed that they didn't. But I think what they did do is kind of solidified and, in fact, enhanced maybe some of the positive vibe that came from that 4-0 start.
Yeah.
And if people were doubting the validity of that 4-0 start a little bit, I think they removed some of those doubts. In fact, probably all of them today. Because, let's face it, they played Ohio State, and even if Ohio State hasn't looked like it's quite firing on all cylinders this season, this is still the defending national champions. They had 7 starters back on each side of the ball from the national title team, not even counting Braxton Miller, their 2-time Big Ten MVP that plays wideout now. They have won 18 straight games, which is the national longest streak. They have won 15 straight road games, which is the nation's longest streak. They have won 25 straight Big Ten regular season conference game, which is an all-time record. And Urban Meyer has never lost a Big Ten regular season conference game since he arrived in Columbus. That's who Indiana played today. And that's what people need to bear in mind a little bit. When people say, well, no moral victories. Well, that's right. There aren't moral victories now. But that was an encouraging performance, a toe-to-toe kind of performance against an elite team. This is like the biggest of the big boys.
Yeah.
So if you can play them, that means you can play just about anybody and have a chance. That doesn't mean things are going to go swimmingly for Indiana from here on out, because frankly, the Big Ten schedule is gnarly.
Yeah.
I mean, the Big Ten looks really tough right now. They'll have a road trip at Penn State, and it's always difficult to go into Happy Valley and get a win. Then they get Rutgers for homecoming. After that, they have to play number 2 ranked Michigan State on the road. Then, after a bye, they have 2 home games against Iowa and Michigan, and Iowa's playing as well or better as any team in the league right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the quarterback changes that Iowa made is just absolutely proved catalytic to them. And Kanzeri coming back healthy at running back. Their defense is playing great. And then Michigan looks friggin' scary. I mean, Michigan has pitched a shutout for 8 straight quarters now. They shut out BYU 31-0. Then they beat Maryland on the road 28-0 today. So look, it's going to be still going to be a really difficult October for IU. But Indiana looked like today that they'll be able to hang in there and compete in all of those games in October, and maybe they'll come up with a couple of wins, and sitting at 4 wins, all they need is a couple.
This month could be a lot more instructive maybe than we originally thought, kind of going into the teeth of their schedule against Ohio State, as you mentioned, Michigan State. These games coming up over the next 4 weeks, because obviously today they proved it. I think the difference really was 3 long runs by Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, they really did a fantastic job bottling him up for much of the afternoon. You take away the touchdown runs of 55, 65, and 75 yards, and I think they finished with 77 yards total rushing.
Well, obviously you can't really take those away.
Well, I mean, you can't, but still, the fact is, outside of those 3 mistakes, really, because they were third and 2, 4th and 1.
Well, they certainly bottled them up in the first half. I think he had 34 something yards rushing at the first half.
14, I think.
Whatever it was. I mean, it wasn't very good, and Elliott's a stud. Let's face it, he's a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Yeah.
I mean, but he was very Tevin Coleman-esque today. I mean, those long runs looked a lot like what Indiana did with Tevin Coleman to people last year.
Yeah.
So, John did the player of the game for us for the paper tomorrow. And what were, Ezekiel's final stats, and what did people say about him?
274 on 23 carries and 3 touchdowns, which was a really big deal for them because Ezekiel Elliott hadn't had a rush over 26 yards since his 80-yarder versus Virginia Tech in Week 1. He had 13 yards, was his biggest rush against Hawaii. Against Western Michigan, he had 26. And the other game, I'm blanking on, there was another 13 yards as long as they had. So for them, they just felt like it was overdue, to get some big runs, and they finally got them.
Well, go ahead.
Who wants to go?
No, you go.
I go. Okay.
Yes.
Let me continue.
Yes.
Urban
For a
Meyer.
change.
But Urban Meyer was really complimentary of Indiana after the game. I mean, he was just saying how this team's going to go to a bowl game. I saw you put that in your column, Andy. I mean, he was, this is a pretty good team. And Cardell Jones said this is an up-and-coming team. That, this isn't just Indiana. People were like, oh, you almost lost to Indiana. It's like, this isn't just Indiana. This is a pretty good team, a team that, is going to play pretty well, and we had to do some things to win.
Yeah, I said in my column that if nothing else today showed that this is a team worthy of support and belief, and we had that today. We had a sold out game, and some people, because of the weather, I think because of the elements, stayed home, but it was pretty full. And not only that, the stands were well populated till the very end, and that's a bit different.
They noticed that,
and the team noticed. The team appreciated that, and the team also said. I mean, Xander Diamont said we played better because of that.
Unprompted, too. Corsaro said the same thing. A lot of guys after being unprompted said, look, I hope these people come back out for homecoming against Rutgers because we notice that and we truly do feed off that, and especially in a game like this when everyone's jacked. That was especially huge, especially with
it helped the team play better.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt.
Absolutely.
But you were talking about the long runs, and I was not meaning to poo-poo the fact that Elliott got almost all of his yards, or it's a huge chunk of his yards on 3 carries. But Indiana still has some work to do, and part of it's remedial. They have young safeties, and these are guys. If you don't fill properly, if you take a bad angle, bad pursuit angle, But the reason your position is called safety is that you're not supposed to allow runs between the tackles to turn into 75-yard touchdown plays. Once Indiana cleans a little bit of that stuff up, because they have good athletes back there, once they get a little better, a little more experienced about how to handle that type of thing, this Indiana defense looks pretty good to me. In terms of the front seven, they were not just 3 and outs; they were like dominating 3 and outs.
Yeah,
the first Ohio State series went straight backwards. And so there was some impressive stuff going on out there. Ohio State ended up with over 500 yards, but as you say, a chunk of that came on 3 runs. Like half of it came on 3 runs. So it was not. It was an encouraging day for Indiana. And once again, people can talk about moral victories or how about not accepting moral victories all they want. Indiana did what it needed to do today, except for winning the game. They showed they could play with the nation's number 1 ranked team. They showed they could beat the nation's number one ranked team. And it doesn't matter now, but we're always going to kind of wonder how Indiana would have played had Nate Sudfeld and Howard and Darius Latham, for that matter, had their normal number of snaps.
The funny thing is, what was it? They had 10 points with Sudfeld on the field, and what was it? 14 more with Xander. I think Indiana can win with Xander Diamont at quarterback. The starting point this year is clearly, obviously, much higher than it was when he was jumping in that Michigan State game last October.
He was dynamic today. The 79-yard touchdown run. Did you mention that earlier? That's the longest
quarterback rush in IU history. When you
history.
Consider
Antoine Randall and some of the other guys that have played here, it's like yikes.
We were talking about that earlier. We brought that up. I'm like, wait, Antoine certainly had something like that, right?
I'm sure he had several like that, but apparently
78 yards.
Apparently one not quite as long.
Going horizontal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true enough.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens this week with Sudfeld. Probably not something we'll know a whole lot about until next Saturday when that game actually starts, I think at noon.
But Xander was dynamic a lot of the time. Once again, the passing attack needs to get better. The receivers need to drop fewer passes and to get open more regularly. But there were still some good plays made out there. I did a note on Simi Cobbs. He made a heck of a 28-yard catch to start what turned out to be a scoring drive in the third quarter. But then, in the second quarter, he dropped a beautiful, really pretty pass on a post from Nate Sudfeld on a 3rd and 8 that would have been a huge gain and a big momentum play. So Indiana needs to get more consistency out of the wideouts. They need to have safeties and linebackers make more consistent fills.
Yep.
There are things like that this team can still get better and needs to get better, and that's part of the lesson today too. But I think they know that.
Yeah, I think so too.
But they also know they can play with anyone and beat anyone, and that's a big thing for them to know too.
Very big, especially as we mentioned going into this stretch here, especially going to Penn State, tough environment. Michigan State later in the month, and as you mentioned, that homestand early November with Iowa and Michigan is going to be a lot difficult,
Right.
a lot more difficult than we probably.
It's going to matter if Jordan Howard's healthy. I mean, that guy's a beast.
He's, I mean, it would, yeah.
That really changed the tone of today's game. I mean, the offensive line was having a hard time clearing lanes. The Ohio State defensive front's really good. I mean, their linebackers might be the best set in the league, and they got Joey Bosa and people like that up front. But there was one time where Howard just carried 8 Buckeyes for a first down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Indiana, had they had that at times today, it might have changed things a little bit. And had Sudfeld been out there, that might have changed things a little bit. Not to take anything away from Diamond, don't get me wrong. I don't think Nate was going to take off on a 79-yard touchdown run. But
actually, it's worth mentioning that's actually an injury he aggravated from last week. That was something he got at Wake Forest. I feel kind of bad because I was standing next to Wake after the game at Wake, next to Nate after the game at Wake, and he had his left ankle actually taped up with ice. It was big pack of ice on there, but I didn't really notice it during the game last week. And today, we saw him hobble just a little bit, but something to kind of monitor.
Well, he's trying to play hurt, and
he wanted to come back.
When you're talking about quarterbacks, pushing off to get, stepping into a throw, all that kind of stuff, it matters. And so, I mean, Nate can be a little bit sharper, but he was playing hurt. So his health and that of Howard will matter going forward.
A lot we'll never know about this day, but I think the most important thing that we do know is that Indiana is competitive. They're coming to play every week, and going forward, I think that'll be pretty instructive to the way this season goes.
I think it's going to be entertaining, however it goes.
We end this every week saying it's going to get interesting. Well, it continues. It's still interesting, and to be at this point, 4-1 Indiana, that's kind of fun to follow. So we'll catch up next week before we head to Penn State. Check in there too, and keep tuned to the Scoop. Thanks, guys.